Hi. I'm going to try and not move like this. I'm just not used to wearing this headset, so if I do start moving funny, then apologies. I'm the guy who's keeping you from your lunch. I know that I am the speaker before lunch, and that is the graveyard slot of conference speaking. So apologies if I hear the tummies rumbling. Then I know that's lunch is calling. So I'm going to try and talk about 2 or 3 things over the course of the next 15 minutes, one of which is the importance of data and understanding your audience. The second thing is about running the campaign that the data tells you to run, not the campaign that is nice and easy for you to run. And finally, just to reiterate some of the things that Isa was saying about social media and how we use those in campaigns. So I'm going to try and work this, so hang on a second. But first, some numbers. So what was the referendum? The first number is probably the most important one, which is 307, which is the number of years that the United Kingdom existed on the day of the referendum. And it really hammers home to me the fact that everybody around the world knows the UK, and if there had been a yes vote, the UK would have not existed the day after the referendum. 307 years of history would have been gone. The United Kingdom would no longer have existed. 28 is the number of months that the campaign ran for. And you're going to hear from some sort of really interesting American speakers after lunch. Even the Americans don't run political campaigns that last 28 months. It was an exceptionally long period of time to run a campaign. Oh, wrong way. 8 was the number of political parties or government organisations who were involved in our campaign. So it was my job to try and make sure that all 8 spoke with one voice. So before the campaign, I had no grey hair, and now I have a lot of grey hair. 16 and 17, for the first time ever in a UK election, 16 and 17-year-olds got the vote. And it really changed the dynamic of the campaign because it was new, because it was so unusual, there was an exceptional amount of focus on what 16 and 17-year-olds thought of the issues. So we had to really tailor a lot of our messaging towards an audience that was younger than most political campaigns had ever had to do before. 97 is an astonishing stat. 97% of the people who are eligible to register to vote did so. 97% of people registered to vote. I mean, it's just incredible to think that such a huge number of people should be engaged, which resulted in a turnout of 85%, which in UK terms is just incredible. To put it in some sort of context, the election for the Scottish Parliament that took place in 2011, the turnout was 50%. So to get 85% of people to turn out in a referendum shows you just exactly how engaged people were. 55.3, one of my now favourite number of all time, was our final result, which translates to that number, which you can all read. You don't need me to tell you what that is. So, onto the campaign and what we did and how it worked. The first thing that I want to talk about is this. At the start of the campaign, we had no idea. We had no idea what people thought. We had no idea which way people were going to vote. There had been opinion polls on this issue for years, for decades. People have been talking about whether Scotland should leave the UK for 80 years. But you cannot trust those opinion polls because, as that says, if you ask a theoretical question, you're going to get a theoretical answer. Until such point as you actually ask the question, you don't know which way people are going to behave. So what we did was we invested all of our money, all of our time, all of our resource, all of our energy in the early part of the campaign to try and find out what people actually thought. And we did it in 2 stages. So the first stage was we tried to figure out actually where the electorate was. What were the numbers? Which way were people going to vote? And not in a superficial way. We really, really buried into it to try and find out exactly which way the population was going. And what it showed us was this. 30% of people were, no matter what we said, no matter what we did, were going to vote yes. There's nothing we could do to change their minds. 40% of people, thankfully, a bigger number, were going to vote no. Nothing the Yes campaign could say or do was going to change their mind. They were going to vote no. So the campaign then became about the 30% in the middle. And as a campaigner and as people who work in campaigns, I implore you to always think about how your campaign can impact those people whose minds can be changed, particularly when it comes to politics. You can spend, and I'll talk more about that, why that's important in a moment, but we ran our entire campaign for the 30% in the middle. And that was why we won, because we knew that the people whose minds could be changed were the ones who we had to talk to. We could have, and again, as I say, I'll talk about this more in a minute, we could have quite easily ran a campaign for the 40%. It would have made my life a lot easier. I would have had less grey hair. We could have done things that people would have been much more receptive to in terms of our core vote, but we would have lost. We only won because we talked to the 30%. So the second phase was, what did they want to hear about? What should we be talking to them about? There's no point us sitting and coming up with a campaign message that isn't actually what people are going to be motivated for. So the 30% told us, after a huge amount of analytical work and research, that they were going to make their decision based on risk and uncertainty, the risk and uncertainty of leaving the United Kingdom, Scotland leaving the United Kingdom. What does that mean? What will it mean to my pension? What will it mean to our schools? What will it mean to our health service? But, crucially, they wanted something to vote for. So the underlying issue was the risk and uncertainty, but the thing that was going to motivate them to vote was to have something to vote for. So once we understood that, it allowed us to start develop messaging. And the strategy that we used was to tell people what the problems were, what the issues were, but crucially, to also tell them what the solution was. So don't just say, everything's going to be bad, everything's going to fall apart, the sky's going to fall down. That would be fine, an easy thing to do, but actually what's going to motivate people to vote is if you tell them what the solution is. So here's the problem, and here's the answer. And the reason that was important was because people felt anxious. From our research, we understood that people felt anxious about making a decision of this magnitude. People knew how big a decision it was, and by telling them, don't worry, here's the answer, was very important because it made people feel much more comfortable about voting. So the message that we got to was this, was I want the best of both worlds for Scotland. It positioned people as being Scottish. It positioned people as, I care about Scotland. I want the best for Scotland's future. And it allowed us to talk about the things that we knew the voters wanted to hear, which were more powers for Scotland. That was the thing to vote for. If you vote no, you're going to get something. You're going to get more powers for the Scottish Parliament. And then there's this word, and. Never underestimate the power of the word and, because it's very easy, if you're running a campaign, to use the word but. We do it all the time when we're talking. Yeah, but. That's not a good and powerful campaign tool. You should talk about and. You can have this and you can have that. So it's not about, if you do this, well, that's going to happen. You need to talk about this and that, and you need to bring the two of them together. So for our purposes, it was more powers for Scotland and the strength, security and stability of the UK. So think back to what people were telling us. They wanted something to vote for, which was the more powers, and they were motivated by risk and uncertainty. So we turned that on its head and said, you don't need to have the risk and uncertainty. You can have the strength, the security and the stability of being part of the United Kingdom. The core vote, as I was telling you about. So, think of those 40% that we are largely ignoring in our campaign. They are motivated by things that the people in the 30%, in the middle, are not motivated by. British identity, a strength of feeling about being British, and the way that the people in the middle weren't necessarily. The people in the middle, I should have said, the 30% undecided liked the idea of working together, They liked the idea of solidarity. They liked the idea of achieving things by working together. Not necessarily about British identity, but actually about the notion of 4 countries within the United Kingdom working together, which is why we ended up calling the campaign Better Together, because we understood that that's what people felt. So we ran a campaign that was aimed at the 30%, and in truth, it pissed off the 40% quite a lot, because we were talking about things that they didn't want to hear. They wanted to hear us, they wanted to see us waving the British flag and talking about land of hope and glory and all these things, and that's not what we did, because you have to run the campaign that will win, not the campaign that's easy. You have to be led by the data. The data will always guide you. Your research will always guide you. And if you do that, that's how you win. If you allow yourself to be sidetracked from what you know the data is telling you, that's when you lose. A word on social media. How am I for time? Yeah, I'm all right, actually. A word on social media. We used social media a lot, as you can imagine. And we used it for a variety of different ways. And before I forget, all of you who are involved in planning campaigns, think about how does your story look as an infographic. Just do it, write it down, everybody write that down. It's so important. The infographics, we use them all the time in our campaign, and they were hugely powerful and hugely effective. But we used social media differently. We used Twitter because of its immediacy and because of the fact that everything breaks on Twitter. Everything breaks on Twitter. We used it to try and influence the conversation, because the people who were commenting on the referendum were all on Twitter. So the journalists, the columnists, all these people who were going to be writing about our campaign and about the issues were all sitting on Twitter. So we used it to aggressively try and influence the campaign. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. But Facebook we used differently. Facebook we used to, yes, influence the campaign, but to do it in a much slower way, to try and introduce themes and to try and introduce stories that we could spread out over a longer period of time. And it worked. It worked in the sense that, I'll show you some numbers in a moment. Facebook was where the conversation ultimately was happening about the debate. When we got to the last about 3 months of the campaign, and we were down to almost weekly and daily focus groups and polling, we kept on saying, where are you going to find the information that's going to allow you to make this decision? And it started off, it was always all the BBC and the newspapers. And as we got closer and closer and closer, people were saying Facebook. I'm going to get my opinion from Facebook. I'm going to get my opinion from speaking to people on Facebook, from my friends, from my family, from articles I see on Facebook. So we knew that actually the important thing for us to do was to try and influence that conversation in a way that was slightly different from Twitter, where we were really aggressively going for it. And in terms of how that worked in practice, we had the TV debates at the very end of the campaign, and we set up Twitter squads. We had these people who were just tweeting aggressively, rebutting points, just getting out there and showing how confident we were in our arguments. So we had banks of people in our campaign headquarters that, as soon as the leader of the Yes campaign said something, they were on it. They were just, oh, that's rubbish, that's nonsense, and let me tell you why. But we had another team who were working on Facebook that were using infographics, that were using real-life examples, that were using videos from real people, and we were posting both of them at the same time. So we were influencing the conversation on Facebook in an entirely different way from the way we were doing it on Twitter. And Facebook, I'm going to talk more about Facebook because Issa's spoken to you about Twitter. Sorry. I don't think you'll be able to see necessarily all that. Can you see up? Can you see those numbers? So the population of Scotland is 6 million. Now this was a post that we put up the night before the referendum at about 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock in the evening, because that's when people are on Facebook, about between 8 and 10. This chap here is a historian. He's on the BBC. He does TV shows. I don't know if you ever watched BBC World. There's a TV show called Coast. Scottish, people love him. And he came out for a no vote. And we posted it, as I say, 9 o'clock the night before the referendum. In about 24 hours, it got a reach of 7.5 million people. It was shared 63,500 times. It was the right content, it was the right message, it was posted at the right time, it was posted at a time where we knew people were going to be engaged, when we knew people were going to be on Facebook, and it just exploded. 7.5 million, one little post. Incredible. So it does allow you to reach people in huge numbers, huge numbers. And you know, I could talk about this forever, and maybe we'll get the chance to chat over lunch. But you have to stay on track. You cannot allow yourself to deviate from the message, from what the research is telling you have to do. But you have to retain the ability to dial up and down. So at some point, you know, you need to focus more on one part of the message and dial down the rest. And as we got closer to the result, our research was telling us that people got the risk and uncertainty, were getting the more powers, but they'd lost track of the solidarity argument. And we needed to really bring that back, because it was a very traditional Labour Party. I don't know if you understand UK politics, but Labour Party is more people of the left. We were seeing a bit of a drift because we'd lost sight, or we hadn't been pushing the solidarity message quite strongly enough. So we produced a film, and we produced it quite quickly, actually. And we put it out, and I'm going to show you it now. It's about 2 minutes long, so apologies for the length of the film, but it actually shows you the way that you can dial up one part of your message while still keeping a baseline of the other parts of it as well. So I think there's a film.
We are a great country, built by the struggles and determination of our people, guided by our unshakable values. We fought for justice in the shipyards and in the mills. Solidarity here and abroad. Equality at work and at home. And what we share has always counted for more than what separates us. We've always had the guts to stand up and fight for what was right, clearing the slums and creating the NHS, the minimum wage, state pensions, working tax credits, rights for workers and families, and we shared the cost, not just among 5 million people, but among 63 million people. We know there is nowhere better, but we understand that there is something bigger. When Donald Dewar announced there shall be a Scottish Parliament, he started building a modern, democratic Scotland as part of a changing UK. And that journey continues. In just a few days, we have the chance to choose progress, to stand up for security, keeping the pound and keeping the defences we rely on, to stand up for our families, defending the 1 million jobs linked to the UK that give opportunities for us and our children, for progress with our strong Scottish Parliament. We don't need to be a separate nation to be a better nation.
I love Scotland. It's as simple as that. I'm proud of our history and our culture. I'm proud we created a Scottish Parliament. I'm proud we're increasing the Parliament's powers. And I'm proud too that we share and cooperate as part of the United Kingdom. And that means more jobs, better healthcare, higher pensions, more security. I'm proud we stand for social justice. Our unity is our strength. And I'm voting for my children's future and all Scottish children's future. And that's why I'm voting no.
So you can see there that, you know, I think we used the words, I wrote the script, I think we used the word solidarity about 16 times or something in there, so we were really hammering home a point. But all of our elements of our message were there. I think we broadcast that about 6 days before the vote in order to sort of capture something that the data was telling was happening, which was people had lost sight of the solidarity message. So the reason for showing you that was you can retain your message, but you can push certain elements of it up and down, and you do that based on what the data is telling you. So look, it was a 28-month campaign. I've spoken for about 16 minutes, so please grab me over lunch if there's anything that you want to talk to me about. But other than that, and I should say, my high school German teacher would be absolutely appalled that I've stood up here and given this presentation in English. I should have done it in German, so I do apologise, but I will finish with a danke. So.